Hello everyone and welcome to the Chrissy B Show. Now today is all about eating disorders. What are they, who gets them and what causes them? I'll be covering some of the common myths about eating disorders that can even make the experience worse for those that have them. My guests today include Dr. Nihara Krause, who will give us the facts, and also Pugh, Youth Ambassador for Beat, who will share her own personal experiences with anorexia nervosa, the work Beat does to help those still suffering, and we'll take a look at a campaign for early intervention. I'll also be speaking to Cheryl Williams, who is currently battling an eating disorder, and we'll find out what you guys know on eating disorders in our street chats. But first, we have the news with Ian and Helena.
Hi.
Hello. How are you both?
We are
Kids.
bouncing as usual.
Very well.
Now, I do have to admit, I don't know that much about eating disorders. I've done a little bit of research, so I'm probably going to end up asking a lot of the questions that the viewers at home would, you know, if they don't know much either. So it's kind of good in a way that I don't know that much. But we're going to find out everything there is to know. How about you guys? Do you know much about them?
Yeah, having
actually.
researched and sort of been in the industry, meeting lots of people, it is fascinating, and so many people have eating disorders.
Okay.
It's quite hush-hush. But anyway, I will begin with congratulations to Gok Kwan. He's been given his honorary doctorate by Birmingham University. And that's all about, I mean, I love Gok Kwan. I don't know if you know about Gok Kwan. He's lovely, isn't he? He's really sweet. He's 40 now. But he's battled with eating disorders, anorexia since his
Actually, that was
20s.
one of the myths. Let me just see here. Let me see, was it?
A myth?
Yes, I have some myths that I was going to cover today about eating disorders. So myth number 2, I'll get to number 1 in a minute. Eating disorders only affect women. So as you can see right now, it doesn't only affect women.
People do think that. But no, I mean, he's fantastic. I mean, he got his honorary doctorate as well because he's all about body image. And he's really empowered lots of women and men, and made them realise that they're beautiful, etc. No, I think he's fabulous. His book, you've read his book, haven't you?
I've read his book. I mean, his book sort of talks about when he was a youngster, you see he was about 21 stone.
Really?
Because his parents ran, first of all, a Chinese restaurant and then ran a fish and chip shop.
Oh, God.
So he just ate and ate and ate. But then he took it to extremes. When he came to London, first of all, he trained as an actor. But he was taking all sorts of different, drugs and all sorts of things just to reduce weight. And in the end, he actually almost ruptured, I think, part of his stomach because he was taking so many of these different pills and different things that...
he actually couldn't go to stage school. I think when he was about 20, he dropped out.
Yeah.
I didn't know any of this about him.
Did you not?
Oh,
No.
I mean, I
he
think
gives talks on it as well, really moving
Because I only ever see him on How to Look Good Naked, and that's it. I haven't really sort of done any research
It's
on
interesting how he terms it as well. He said for him, it's like a parasite that won't go away. He's got it every day, and he has to battle with it every day. But he keeps going, and actually it does affect perfectionists. And one of his biggest fears in presenting is failure. But it keeps him going. He realises he's got one life. He's sort of coming to terms with it, and it keeps him moving forward. And you know, he's done incredibly well, and amazing as well that he's a guy.
Yeah. But it affects all sorts of people, and especially in the performing arts as well. I mean, as you know, I used to be an investigative journalist, and in the 1980s, I had to run a campaign, and we ran a campaign against Royal Ballet, of all places. And they created a thing called the Russian silhouette. And the Russian silhouette was that it was almost emaciated ballerinas.
Was this the 80s, did you say?
1980s. And I used to go into Royal Ballet and some of the other ballet schools, and the girls were eating paper. And they ate paper and smoked.
Oh dear.
And of course, because of that, and because there's a lot of tension on their feet, bones were breaking, calcium was going. But in the end, it really sort of came when anorexia was really rife at one stage, and girls were dying from it. And I worked with the mother of one girl who had died from anorexia, who was a Royal Ballet ballerina. And we eventually sort of cut it out, but they just wanted this different type of look. And at that time, there was very little understanding of anorexia as well. I used to work with the Royal Free Hospital in London, and they started a thing called art therapy. and art therapy was really for anorexia nervosa. And it was designed to actually give a communication system to people who were suffering from it, so they could actually draw how they felt. And they thought that this would sort of be one method of it.
I think going back to ballet and everything, that was the 80s. I mean, it's still, you know, happening now as well. And there was I can't remember her name, but she was a normal girl, but she wasn't famous, from a ballet school, and she got very, very ill, and she had to stay off for a while, and she lost loads of weight, but because she had a virus. When she came back, they said, "Oh my goodness, you look amazing, you look so thin, and you look, you know, you just look beautiful." And they were, you know, she was being almost rewarded for being so thin. And of course, then everybody wants to be thin. And
actually, our street chats later on, I was watching them earlier, and there's a few dancers. I'm not sure if they said it was ballet, but they were saying, a couple of them were Afro-Caribbean, and they were saying how, you know, sort of, you know, they've got that naturally voluptuous buttocks, and they're telling them, tuck your bum in when you're dancing because it's sticking out too much, and that obviously is going to put stuff in their head, like it's not good to have that kind of bottom. It's just their body shape, and you see where some of these ideas and these pressures come from.
You can. Also, Elton John, who we all know, he suffered for years and years with bulimia. And he, along with his good friend, Princess Diana, they had a lot of camaraderie and got through it, and she helped him. They both helped each other. And he, I think, had therapy, and I think at the age of, when was it? It was 1990 he managed to kick it. I think it was cocaine as well, but bulimia, he managed to. So we know.
Okay.
But again, that's another guy, and I think it's amazing to be able to voice it, because it's very, very, people
that's the
keep
thing.
it
I think the more we
secret.
speak about it, the better it's going to be for people that are going through it, that can, you know,
and it's so important as well, because the one thing that Helen and I campaigned 4 years ago, we created a thing called What About Me? And What About Me was all about size zero, and why is size zero being on the catwalk, and the history behind size zero and what it's meaning to people now today. That one of the biggest things that always concerns me nowadays is pre-teen magazines. Pre-teen magazines are now the only one of the few methods of actually media at making money. So it focuses 7 to 12-year-olds on being skinny, really. You know, they're sort of putting out that message all the time. And it's causing all sorts of problems with itself at the same time, to the fact now that these preteen magazines are absolutely, they're huge business right across the world. You know, things like Vogue are doing their preteen magazine. But what's happening now is that a lot of children, girls between 7 and 12, are starting to diet. They're affecting what they're actually sort of consuming as well. And the World Health Organization now are actually doing a 10-year campaign where they've been looking at 7 to 12-year-olds, because girls now are menstruating much younger than they used to, and it's because of the diet. And so it's causing them all sorts of health issues for the future as well. It's gone past the stage of, it's for boys and girls, it's gone past the stage of teenagers, it's actually gone back to 7 to 12-year-olds now.
Yeah, and there's lots of these young girls, and they're I'm saying young girls, but they carry around pictures of emaciated, you know, quite celebrities, let's just say, and they want to be them and want to emulate.
It's funny because I'd just like to read myth 3, because it's saying here, obviously, that eating disorders are caused by glamorous images of celebrities in the media. So it goes a lot further than that as well. Okay, well, obviously we know that the media does affect, and this is something that I'd like to actually know more about, because it's just not just the media, it's other things as well that.
It's other things as well, but it's very much visual led. You know, and that's what a lot of these preteen magazines. I mean, hopefully they're more responsible now. When we were looking at it 4 years ago, you know, every major magazine company in the world was springing on the back of preteen magazines because it was making money.
I think it can work the other way as well. I mean, this flipping it on its head. There are like pro-anorexia websites, which you know, there's lots of them because of the, you know, social networking, etc. A well-known TV presenter found out that she'd been targeted because she's quite slim, but they were just saying how amazing she was, and she was horrified because she's, you know, obviously didn't want to be seen in that light. do you know, at this minute, and I can't remember her name, how it uses his hands. But she's no, but it's just amazing. But also Sarah Ferguson, a lot of her association with food. I mean, she lost her father when she was younger.
Yeah.
And just was eating just comfort food, etc. And it was only until she actually managed to go to Weight Watchers that they taught her how to control food. So she's always got this, when she's feeling down or whatever, to eat lots of food, but then she just goes back to her regime.
But they always say that anorexia is one method of actually being able to control your life. And it's you know, because when people are out of control and they think that it's the only thing that they feel they can control, and it was supposed to be one of the original causes of anorexia.
Okay, we'll
just
have to leave it there. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry we've run out of time. Thank you so much. I know that we should go back to it. Definitely. Thanks so much. All right, well, do stay tuned, because after the break we're going to be hearing from Kat Pugh and her ongoing journey from eating disorders and her campaign for early intervention.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Chrissy B Show, always aiming to show you the happier side of life. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter.
Welcome back to the show. We're speaking all about eating disorders today. Now, before we go to our first guest, let's take a look at this video.
Okay, can you hop on the scales for me, please? To be honest, although low, you are still at what we would consider a healthy weight. Unfortunately, you do not meet our criteria.
Walk with me, love.
I am unable to offer you treatment at this time.
Walk with me, love. All alone, this tedious journey. Won't you walk with me? Walk with me, love. Walk with me. All alone, this tedious journey. Won't you walk with me? Take my hand, Lord. Take my hand, Lord. All alone, this tedious journey. Won't you take my hand? Let me sleep now. Let me sleep now. Let me in this tedious journey. Won't you let me sleep?
Wow, waited for 2 years to get help. Okay, so now it's time to meet Kat Pugh, who's Beat Ambassador. Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, yeah.
It's so lovely to have you on, because as I said at the beginning of the show, this isn't something that I know very much about, and I'm looking forward to learning about it and also helping our viewers, those that are going through something, and also those that don't know anything about it, to help support people. So first of all, tell us your experience with eating disorders.
Yeah. I currently suffer with an eating disorder, and I'm currently getting treatment privately, but I've had an eating disorder since about the age of 11.
Okay.
So I'm 25, so do the maths.
Yeah.
That's quite a long time to have an eating disorder. I'm diagnosed with anorexia nervosa, but a part of the anorexia nervosa is also eating disorders not otherwise specified. So that means that I alternate between binge eating on some occasions, and I also have the anorexic tendencies as well.
Okay.
My eating disorder started when I was 11. I was an early developer, so my period started quite early, and so when I started secondary school, I had quite a developed body for someone of my age.
How did that make you feel when you
well, I don't think they don't really sort of teach you at that age that actually you've got a much curvier body, because it's actually because you're a growing woman. And so for me, I had started secondary schoal, I was perhaps a little less confident than some of my peers. And I made sort of some associations that I wasn't sort of fitting in socially, and aspired to fit in.
So I suppose at that early stage, if you were being taught that at school, that possibly
it might
could
have
helped.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I mean, I wanted to be like the popular girls in my class, the ones that I sort of saw as prettier, the ones that I sort of saw they had boyfriends, or if you can call it relationships at that age. But I wanted to be that, and in my eyes they were thin. A boy called me fat as well, which didn't really help things. And then so I started to take things into my own hands by controlling my diet, and I actually ended up gaining a lot of weight just by the fact I was skipping meals and then binging when I came home from school.
Okay. How can you sort of describe a little bit about what you used to do, just for for the viewers to know?
Yeah,
exactly what you're talking about?
I mean, I was the sort of first few years of secondary school, I think, were incredibly unhappy. I felt incredibly unhappy, incredibly depressed. I think one of the common myths, we're talking about myths a lot, is that when you're, or it's not necessarily a myth, but something that's perhaps not known, is that when you're malnourished, you will be very, or if you skip meals throughout the day, you will, one of the side effects will be depression. And I was skipping breakfast and lunch, and through that was really affecting my moods. I had quite severe mood swings, and as a result felt incredibly depressed.
Was it just because of the sort of the way you're eating, or were there other factors that made you feel depressed too, would you say?
I think probably a mixture of both, actually. I think obviously the fact that I wasn't happy at school didn't help, but certainly for some of the evidence that I've learnt through more recent treatment that I've had has said that actually having regular meals throughout the day, and meals that include carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and all the balanced nutrients that you need, will stabilise those moods. And quite clearly at that point I wasn't doing that, which obviously didn't help me feel very, very good about myself.
When did you realise that you needed help? Was it someone that intervened, like a family member, or was it you yourself that asked for help?
So I think when I was sort of in my early teens, so about 11 to 14, I recognised that I had a problem, but I didn't think I'd be taken seriously. In my head, I thought I needed to be very thin to be taken seriously, and so
as we showed on the video.
And I very much wanted to. I thought that in order to actually say something to anybody, I needed to be that stick thin person. That, again, a common myth is that everybody who has an eating disorder falls under the reception of anorexia nervosa. Actually, anorexia nervosa is the least common of all eating disorders, but it's the one that people associate. But it's the one that we see all the images of. It's the one that we most commonly recognise, but it's not the most common at all. But that's what people are drawn to. If you say you have an eating disorder, people think anorexia nervosa, and I didn't think I'd be taken seriously. I didn't think people would understand where I was coming from. I decided to, as things got more serious, physically for me through my sort of latter teens. So when I was doing my GCSEs and A-levels, I did start sort of speaking to my GP about it. I also use Beats and their helplines, which are fantastic. And they really encouraged me to go and speak to my GP and my parents. But I didn't actually, and I do think this was a really bad mistake, I didn't actually confide in my parents until it was really, really serious, and then I actually required inpatient treatment.
Because I think that sort of happens with a lot of people. I mean, I know when I went through depression, I didn't sort of want to worry them, and I didn't want to sort of change the atmosphere in the house, because it was quite a happy household, and I kind of hid it. Was that the same thing with you, would you think?
Yeah, and I think for me, it was very, very easy to hide things. I wasn't initially losing weight. I could get away with things very easily. I didn't want them to worry about me. It's a mixture of things, isn't it? Really? It is a mixture. It is a mixture of things. Also, I think I almost felt like if I told them and I wasn't thin enough, then that power would be taken away from me. That power to control my diet. That power to control the thing that I had control of. And actually, when I did need to tell them, it was kind of an ultimatum coming from a number of different areas. School had got involved by this point. They'd recognised there was a problem, so somebody else was going to tell them if I didn't. And actually, telling them was probably one of the best things that I could have done, because it was. I've described it before as it's like ripping off a really painful bandage or plaster. It really, really hurts, but when you've done it, everything feels a lot better.
Okay, you're going to stay with us because we need to go to a quick break. We're going to go more into your story, and also we're going to be joined by Cheryl Williams, and you're going to be hearing about the eating disorder that she has at the moment and how she's coping with it.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Chrissy B Show, always aiming to show you the happier side of life. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter.
Welcome back to the show. So we are talking all things eating disorders today, and now I'm joined by Cheryl Williams, who you may have seen before because she actually works on the show. Hi, Cheryl.
Hello, Chrissy.
It's been a long day for you, hasn't it, my love?
It has been a long day, yes.
So can you tell us what your condition is at the moment? What's going on?
I have binge eating disorder, and I binge profusely. And I've been doing it for a very long time, and I didn't realise that it was something that was an issue. I just felt like it was just me who couldn't control their eating for whatever reason, that I was just greedy or lazy, which of course makes me feel even worse and triggers more my feeling and my it tempts me more to binge because I don't like to feel negative feelings, and eating is a way for me to block feeling anything negative. So anytime something would get a bit stressful or I would get upset, I would binge. And it became a daily occurrence where I just was so unhappy that every day, in order to sleep, I would need to binge.
Wow.
And I would do that every day.
Do you remember like when it first started and why maybe that
you got
into that cycle?
I was about 13 years old.
Very young again, so 111, 113.
And I was in secondary school, and I'd noticed that I was not able to stay awake in class because I have a sleeping disorder called narcolepsy, where I randomly fall asleep. And so because of this, I was not top of the class anymore. And that's something that I had always been from 4 years old. So my grades were going down and I couldn't stay awake, and I was eating uncontrollably, and I was putting on weight, and it's just a vicious cycle.
So it's one problem triggered another
Exactly.
issue. Okay. Now you are getting treatment at the moment. When did you actually start to get treatment, recognise that you needed help?
I was 21 when I realised
So all that time battling on your own?
Yeah.
How did you manage?
We tried everything. I joined to the gym. I had a nutritionist. I went to fat camps twice no, 3 times. 3 times.
So all sort of kind of skittering around the issue, but not really getting down to what it really was.
I didn't realise there was anything else. I just thought that, I also felt like if I had a body that was nice or slim, then I would look after it. Because I didn't feel like what I had at that stage in time was worth looking after.
And when did you actually confide in your parents, or did they notice something?
They noticed. They noticed. I mean, I put on a lot of weight very quickly in my teens, and I was actually very athletic as well growing up. I competed regionally in athletics.
Wow.
So I then had to stop doing that because I just couldn't, I was no longer, my times weren't good enough. So, and because I wasn't good enough, I just gave up on it.
I have to say, Cheryl, because obviously working together, you're, I would say, a very positive person, and, you know, very pleasant to be around and friendly and everything. So it's like both of you, actually, you're both doing something with your lives. You're not letting this condition actually put you in a corner and make you just stay there and not do anything with your life. How do you keep going? What do you do?
I think for me, well, certainly when I was hospitalised, I think one of the things that helped me in terms of my recovery then, and certainly now as well, and obviously there's been a bit of a gap since I was an inpatient when I was 17 and I'm now 25. But I look at sort of motivational stepping stones. So sometimes things are quite big goals. So I've got a big goal to go to South America on holiday. But other things are much sort of smaller but intermediary goals. And that's certainly something that I work through with my dietitian. So what is something that's a manageable goal that I can get to perhaps just for next week? Is there a friend I can go and see and go and chat to as a motivational goal? And those would be little goals that got me through my recovery while I was in hospital. And I think certainly turning negatives into positives is something that I've been very, very keen to do. A couple of years ago, became quite unwell again. I recognised that I needed some support, so I actually went back to my GP to get a referral to the NHS, which is what led to the video that we've just watched. I was told I waited a year for treatment myself, and others have waited much longer. And I went through the process, which involves an assessment in a very lengthy form. I had about a 3-hour assessment and was told that I didn't meet their very strict criteria for treatment. And that was including outpatient treatment. And that, for me, motivated me to lose more weight, because I thought that in order to get help, to get better, I needed to lose weight. And that was the signals that the criteria and that treatment was sending me. There were kind of initial negative consequences for that, because I then became even more poorly. However, what I also did,
help on your part, wasn't it? I mean,
it was.
It's like there seemed to be nothing else to do and nowhere else to get help. So it's like you took matters into your own hands, in a way.
It was, but I also, what I did from that is get very angry. Wrote to my local MP, wrote to a number of other MPs, and also started contacting the health service, contacting other charities to actually really recognise it as an issue, because if it was affecting me, it had to be affecting a lot of other people, and hence I produced the video. But
tell us quickly about Beat as well, or Beat.
Of course. So I've been involved as a Beat Young Ambassador since 2011. As a Young Ambassador, I get to do lots of very exciting things, such as coming on Chrissy B, but also I get to speak out on eating disorders in the media, but also I get to do schools talks. I did a skydive last year as a fundraiser. But importantly, it raises awareness. As a young ambassador, you get to raise awareness about issues using your own case studies, and help alleviate any stigma surrounding eating disorders. Young ambassadors are people that are in recovery or recovered, so they've all got a story to share. Beat are the UK's eating disorder charity, Any fundraising goes towards their helplines. They provide crucial helplines for people who are under 25. They also have carers helplines, and they also provide training and do a lot of campaigning. Yes, it's for all, it covers all eating disorders, and they also support men as well who have eating disorders.
Okay. Now, Cheryl, the same question to you. How do you sort of cope on a day-to-day basis and keep that lovely smile on your face?
Well, like Kat was saying with early intervention, when I first went to my GP, I was told the wait was long, and it was over a year.
Gosh,
I waited to the point where I'd forgotten that I was waiting to be referred to cognitive behavioural therapy. And I said to myself, I really need help. And so I started scouring the internet for things, and I started reading.
So you took matters into your own hands too.
Yeah. Reading motivational books, anything that I could find to help hold on till the next day.
Yeah.
Anything sort of. I didn't really tell anybody at that point. And even my appointments, I went through all my appointments, and my parents didn't actually know that I was going to them. I would go to work, and then I would go to my appointment, and then go back to work.
Why didn't you want to tell them? Just the worry, or?
I think it's coming from an ethnic background. Understanding mental illness is not something that I think that they would understand completely, despite it being completely rife in my family. My mother suffers from it, and her sister suffers from it, and so it's just something that's just never really talked about. And I'm also an only child, so I'm not really very open with my parents. I'm very close to my parents, but I'm not very open with my parents in my own personal life. So it was really, for me, they'd also tried their best to help, and I just felt like...
In their own way, I suppose.
In their own way, yeah.
Even though parents get it completely wrong sometimes and say all the wrong things, don't they?
Yes.
But they try, it's just because they don't understand.
It's because they don't understand, and I don't expect them to. So I sort of just thought that it's something that I have to, it's my problem, and I have to fix it.
Okay. Well, we're going to be having Dr. Nihara Krause on after the break, and she's actually a specialist in eating disorders. So she's going to be sort of giving us the facts, telling us about some of the common eating disorders. And we're also going to be taking a look at some street chats. We asked some people on the streets of London what they knew about eating disorders. So do join us after this.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Chrissy B Show. Always aiming to show you the happier side of life. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter.
Welcome back to the show. So we're going to be speaking to Dr. Nihara Krause, who specialises in eating disorders, in just a moment. But let's take a look at what the people on the streets of London had to say about what they know about eating disorders.
What do you know about eating disorders?
I don't know a great deal about it. Coming from a dance school background, I know that a couple of girls where I trained were struggling with their bulimia, anorexia and stuff, but I don't know a great deal myself about it, but I have been around it.
That in the industry we're in, it's rife because we're dancers, so a lot of people have eating disorders.
Probably not as much as I should. We got taught quite a lot about it at school. I've had a few friends who've had eating disorders, but I don't know much about it myself.
I think it's a mental thing. It's a mental thing, especially from my experience of things. It's a perceived thing, like especially among dancers, girls whose bodies are fine, and or the way the social conditioning affects them. So they come into the kind of dance world with an idea of what their body should be like, and the body is probably like that already, but in their mind, if they're not well enough to withstand the kind of pressure of society and the way, like for instance, being of an ethnic background and being from a black background, we have bums and stuff, and doing ballet class where the girls are trying to tuck their asses in, and somebody tell them, you get told certain things about tucking, and And if you're not sound mentally, you begin to think, oh, I need to lose that, I need to do this, I need to not eat as much, da, da, da. So it's a mental thing, in my opinion.
Actually, I don't know much about eating disorders. I had a friend who had anorexia, but that's it, actually.
I don't have much knowledge on what the government do, but I don't think it's taken seriously enough. I don't think.
And I think it is, but I think it's also hard because it's so much in someone's mind. So I think it's quite hard for people to help someone who is struggling so much. Like, it's a mental thing, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So I think even when they set up houses for girls to go to, I think that's hard because if it's in their brain, it's in their brain. So it's quite hard to change that. But it is a shame because I think it's so much more rife in our day and age. I think it's happening more and more that more people get it.
Every time I told her, you're so skinny, why you don't eat? But she said, I eat, why you say so? And it was a circle for her.
Okay, so that's the opinions from people that we spoke to. Welcome, Dr. Nihara Krause.
Hello,
How are you doing?
Hi, very good, thank you.
All right, so you've heard obviously the two stories here, and I think very brave for both of them to come on and talk about what they are going through. According to what you heard there on the street chats, did people have it completely wrong? Was there anything that was completely like, this isn't correct, or did they hit the nail on the head?
People didn't have it wrong, but I think perhaps they don't have as much detail as might be helpful to understand eating disorders. I think people often have a belief that somebody has control over their eating and that what they're doing might be attention seeking in a sense, and that they've just got to put their mind to it and they can kind of give it up. And that really isn't the case. Eating disorders are serious mental health conditions. They reflect kind of a lot of psychological distress. They're often underlined by low self-esteem, so it's something that people do initially, as we heard from both stories really, to feel better about themselves. They might be a reflection of feeling very kind of out of control, trauma of some sort. So there's a range of different very distressing issues that might lead a person, particularly a young person, to develop an eating disorder. And then once you develop an eating disorder, the eating disorder in itself takes over, and it kind of creates a sort of a life and soul of its own that then becomes in itself difficult to battle with. So it then becomes a physical condition that you've got to also treat alongside the psychological issues that made it happen.
Well, the good news is there is treatment available.
There is treatment, and there's very good treatment, but it is really, really important. And I think the campaign to look at early awareness and early intervention is absolutely essential. And without scaring people, just to say that anorexia nervosa has the highest mortality rate of any psychiatric condition. Really? So it's very serious because it has a huge effect on your heart. As well as a number of other organs. Compulsive binge eating disorder has its own physiological symptoms. So these are conditions that really do require treatment, and the earlier you can get at anything, the better. It's better physiologically, but it's also much better psychologically because you have tools to try and deal with stuff before it gets too bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you just quickly run through the different kinds of eating disorders?
Yes, of course. Now, in theory, in terms of the diagnostic criteria, there are only 3 main eating disorders, and they are anorexia nervosa, which is when you lose weight to a level that is dangerous for you, together with a whole load of other kind of psychological symptoms. There's bulimia nervosa, where again the intention is to try and lose weight, but you kind of alternate between binge eating and restriction, but you also use a number of different methods like laxative use or throwing up to try and regulate your eating. And then you have binge eating disorder, where you have the binges without the behavior to try and get rid of the food in some sort of way. However, because there's a large range of eating disorders that might not necessarily meet the criteria, they're sort of all lumped together under the category that Kat mentioned, which is called, it's called eating disorders not otherwise specified, which basically from a sort of clinical sense means that they are subclinical. So they haven't got to the stage or the serious stage that might be required in anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa and binge eating disorder. However, there are a number of what I would call disorders of eating, and these cause just as much distress to people. And they are things like body dysmorphic disorder, where there is a change in terms of how you see your body, and a number of young men in particular will suffer from body dysmorphic disorder. There are food phobias, so people kind of perhaps potentially having had a terrible experience with eating something or being afraid to eat will then stop eating altogether, so extremely dangerous. You can have selective eating disorder, which is something actually that I'm kind of a bit of a specialist on, which is where people only eat a very tiny range of food. There are, there's something called emetophobia, which is the fear of throwing up, and because you're frightened of throwing up, you don't eat. So there's a range of other types of eating conditions. Yes, yeah, a whole range. And those are even harder to get help for because they don't fall under the umbrella of a traditional eating disorder.
Now both our ladies are actually getting treatment.
Yes.
You're receiving treatment, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, despite having the difficulties to get help on the NHS, I've been very lucky that my parents have actually been able to fund private treatment for me, which has actually really helped me get to a much better place. And so I've been seeing a therapist weekly, and I've had a brilliant dietitian as well.
Oh, excellent.
So there is hope, there is help out there, and that's obviously aided me in my recovery. But yeah, I do really, I would really say to people that if you are suffering with an eating disorder, that you should definitely go and speak to somebody.
Because they're not alone, are they? Sometimes it feels like you're the only person in the world that's going through a certain situation. That's just not true. It feels worse when you think it's just you, isn't it?
I'd recommend calling the Beat helpline. I'd recommend speaking to a parent if possible, if you feel comfortable speaking to your parents. Although I delayed speaking to my parents, I really regret not speaking to them earlier on. I think it's much easier to get that out of the way. Confiding in a friend, confiding in a teacher. The sooner you can get help, the better.
Talking about parents, Nihara, how can families help?
Well, I think families can help in lots of different ways. First of all, find out about eating disorders, learn about them, learn about what the early signs might be in a young person. Also, I think it's really hard for families because eating disorders change how you think. They kind of, as I said before, they take over. And so for parents that can be extremely distressing because they might think, well, I've lost my child in some way because they've become this terrible, difficult young person to deal with. But understand that that's the kind of the nature of the eating disorder rather than them. So to be consistent, to be supportive, to explore avenues of help, to not see it as attention seeking, but something that is extremely distressing. And also to think about supporting themselves and supporting siblings, because eating disorders have a huge effect on siblings. And I think it's also important to think about the wider family network and to do something about it. And I just also want to just quickly add that, we talk about eating disorders as though they kind of only affect a small group of the population. What I just want to say is that all of us, and I think this is true of most mental health conditions, is that, mental health conditions are on a spectrum. So we all, most of us kind of at times don't feel good about our bodies. Most of us might have binged at some point in time. Most of us would have gone on a diet. So, these are not things that just happen to some people. They are within all of us. And, all you need is that one trigger. And if you don't have good confidence, if you don't kind of feel particularly happy, then an eating disorder might be something you develop. So we all need to look after our mental health.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Ladies, thank you so much. I feel like we could go on for another hour, but we do have to go. Thank you, Kat, and all the best with everything you're doing with Beat. Cheryl, thank you so much for sharing your story. I've gotten to know you a bit more today. And Dr. Nihara, thank you so much for sharing this brilliant advice. And you know, the main point is please do get help. You're not alone. There's plenty of help out there now. You know, I think more's being done by the government very soon, hopefully, right? She's campaigning for that. So hopefully things will change. All right, so thanks very much. If you want more information about our guests today, you can visit our website, chrissybshow.tv. And if you'd like to email me, you can do so on chris@chrissybshow.tv. Bye for now.